You're listening to audio from University Baptist Church in Beavercreek, Ohio. Our mission is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known. Please enjoy this podcast and visit us at ubcbeavercreek.com for more information.
Welcome into UBC Talking Points. Our purpose is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known through ministry and theology conversations. I'm your host, Bryson Jackson, and today I am joined by my friend, Harry Steck. Harry?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Long trip yesterday, rested some last night. I'll get more tonight.
Yeah, good. Well, Harry, you're in a season of some travels occasionally, going to see family down in Alabama, Pennsylvania. Were you guys up in Michigan?
In Michigan.
Okay.
Yep.
I knew I'd hit it with one of those.
Right. And
Wonderful.
the other one's Oklahoma, but we're not going to go there just yet.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Well, Harry, you serve here at UBC as an elder in our church, and then also as the director of finance and facility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So before we dive into some of our content for today, which we're really excited about, I'm super pumped about talking just about the history of UBC and some things like that through your eyes over the years. But before we dive in, you, for a number of years, served in the military, served in the service. What is one of your favorite moments or memories serving in the military?
I'd probably say from a personal perspective, quick background, after high school, I went to the Air Force Academy as a cadet, graduated from there, went to Stanford for a master's degree, and then went to pilot training. Why did I get into the Air Force? A good part of it was the fact that my father was a pilot in World War II and served very wonderfully, reading some of the logs of some of his gunners on a B-17, just opened up a whole new part of his life that he never spoke much about. But the other side of that is that at the end of World War II, now I take that back. During World War II, my mother got her pilot's license, and at the end of World War II, she was in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, the WASP. And so that with piloting my background, I thought that it would be a good idea to go learn how to do that. Wow. So then fast forward to having finished grad school and going to pilot training, finishing pilot training. Both my mother and my dad and the rest of my family were there when I got my wings put on. And my father gave me his copy of wings that he had worn during World War II. So that was just really meaningful to us.
Wow. Yeah, it's extremely meaningful. And just thinking about even the way in which that's such a full circle moment, you know, where you've taken on something that was very special for both of your parents, and then your parents to be able to be there, pass that on. Man, that's cool. So how many years did you serve in the Air Force? So
on active duty, I was 30 years. That doesn't count the time at the Air Force Academy. That's as far as I could go by law in terms of serving in the rank that I was at. Okay.
Man, that's awesome. And where did you grow up? Because I'm assuming that you guys came to the Dayton area because of Wright Pat.
Yes.
So where did you grow up, and how did you wind up coming to Dayton?
Well, Air Force brought me to Dayton. Okay. Where did I grow up? I grew up just north of Philadelphia, almost due north of the center of the city, in a place called Abington, Pennsylvania. Gotcha. Near Willow Grove, Jenkintown. Okay. That's when I went from there to the academy for school, and then on into the Air Force. Air Force took us around a lot of places from at Colorado, then California, then Alabama, then let's see, where do we go next? Had a good time. Dyess, Texas. Went back to the academy in Colorado, out to Edwards Air Force Base, where I was part of the experimental test pilot school curriculum, and then graduated there and stayed there for a couple of years. Back to Alabama for more schooling, up to Systems Command Headquarters at that time in Andrews Air Force Base. After that, the Lord gave me a interesting but challenging assignment. I wound up going to Khartoum, Sudan for a year without the family. Wow. And served there, and then came back at Wright-Patterson and left here when Was here for 5 years, went up to Rome, New York, as we closed that base and up there, and then we came back here. And so the last 3 years of my service, I was here at Wright Pat.
Wow. Now, did you meet Sue when you were in Alabama, or had you guys met before you were stationed there?
No. And just a very quick testimony in that respect. And when I was in, when I was at the Air Force Academy, on one of the summer breaks, I was at a camp with a group called the Navigators.
Yeah.
And in that camp, I was very impressed by the quality of the 3 couples that led the camp. Each one of them had a testimony that basically said, I turned over finding a mate for me to the Lord. And in the meantime, I served the Lord in the process. And so I said, I thought that was a very wonderful way to approach it, and did likewise. So I made that commitment. During that next year, my senior year, the Lord made that clear to me that it was going to be after I was done my training. I've already told you after the academy, I went to grad school. Mm-hmm. I went to pilot training. That was a good 2.5 to 3 years. And that was a wonderful time of just getting to know the Lord, having Bible studies and being involved in studies. And so then when I left the Craig to go learn how to fly and how to teach people to fly, Sue moved into Selma. And when I went back then after that learning experience to teach it, that's when I first met her.
Mm. That's so cool. That's so good. Like, just thinking about the way in which the Lord challenged you through examples of others who, put before the Lord spouse and marriage, and how that encouraged you in that season to really zero in on your walk with Christ. Mm-hmm. And then the Lord provided in perfect timing. Your wife.
It was.
That's so sweet. Praise the Lord for that. Navigator ministry. That's good stuff. So I know there's a number of us on staff who have had some influence from Navigator ministry over the years. So that's fantastic. All right. So thinking then about your deployment here for 5 years with Wright Pat. So when you came to Wright Pat for the first time, did you get connected to UBC those first 5 years? Where did you go to church when you were here first?
Okay. So like was our practice, when we got to a new community, we would go and survey a few number of churches, go to them for a couple of weeks, and then allow the Lord to lead us to one. When we got here, by the time we got here to Wright-Patterson in 1989, we had a son and a daughter. And we went around and checked 3 or 4 or 5 different churches. And oftentimes, and so by the time we got to the 4th one, we were ready to go to the 5th one. And my daughter, Tamara, basically said, I'm not going to another one, pick one. So we thought about the ones that we had gone to on Sunday evenings, because back then, traditionally, churches had Sunday morning and Sunday evening activities. Yeah. And we basically looked at each other and said, we just went back every Sunday night to University Baptist Church. And so we started coming here at that point.
That's awesome. So 1989 was when you first started coming to University Baptist. Right. And was University Baptist at Haynes and Kemp, or was it in another location at that time?
So at that time, we were over at what would have been at that point Grange Hall and New Germany Trabine. Today that's called Pentagon Boulevard over there.
Got it.
The building's still there, and I'll get to that part in a minute. But anyway, that's where we started, and we worshiped there for much of that early time.
Okay, got it. So you were full-time with the Air Force at that time?
Yes.
And then did you attend University Baptist for the full 5 years that you were here?
Yes. Once we joined, we continued with his church.
Got it. So who was the pastor when you first joined the church in 1989?
Okay. So at that point, it was Andy Hollinger.
Okay.
And over at Kemp Road, and so I'm sorry, over at New Grange Hall. At any rate, and so we were growing. We tried to fit an extra new building on the lot that was very constrained, and it just wasn't working. Pastor Hollinger lived on the corner of this current property on Haynes Road and on our northwest corner.
Really?
And he was familiar with the church and had become friends with a pastor here. And this church was struggling. There had been a number of people who had gone back to another church, and so they were struggling financially. And in his heart, he saw this as a very viable opportunity to have a much larger capability future. So he got in discussions with that pastor, and after 2 years, we voted and they voted to exchange properties, to take on their debt, and to exchange some other stuff. And we then took possession of this property at Kemp and Haynes, and then they took possession of the Grange Hall in Pentagon Boulevard.
Fascinating. Okay, so Pastor Hollinger, did I say that right? So Pastor Hollinger, he lived over here.
Right next to this, on that property.
And so he knew the pastor who was, shepherding this congregation that was here. What was the name of the church that was here? Do you remember?
I think it was I think it was an Assembly of God church, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay, interesting. So he had built relationships, and then, University Baptist was growing, needing more space, and it's like, hey, we need more space. You guys are struggling. Can we just swap buildings?
Right.
And that's what happened.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Started once, had a pause for several months, and then we did it a second time and decided to do that.
That is wild. Okay, so do you remember the year that happened? Was that like early 90s?
That would have been 92, I think, 93, 92, 93, somewhere around there.
Okay. Now that property on Grange Hall Road that you're talking about when you guys first started attending, was that where University Baptist started? Was that the original property?
When you use the word started, that's a loaded word.
Yeah, let's kind of tease that out a little bit.
Originally, the several families got together, decided they'd like to start a mission.
Okay.
How they connected with, I believe, Huber Heights, I'm not sure, but Huber Heights agreed to sponsor them as a mission.
Yep. First Baptist of Huber, correct?
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
And then Estel and Alita Johnson were instrumental as a part of that, and in their basement was the first worship service and Sunday school that they had as a mission.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
I believe 67. I think.
Yep, checks out.
And so the church began to grow from there. I'm not sure when. As far as I know, the only place they ever started a building was over on Grange Hall in New Germany, Trevine. That was the first and the only building they started with, and then they came here was the next one.
So those families, they got connected at First Baptist of Huber, but some of them lived down this direction.
Evidently.
Yep, and they decided to start a church in their basement.
Yeah.
Praise
and I'm not so sure. Unlike the plants that we're doing today, I'm not so. I don't know how the original group of, let's just say, 10 families got together, but I don't think they necessarily were all from Huber Heights. But they joined together and got permission and got sponsorship in a sense from Huber Heights.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's wild because in talking with the pastors who are now at First Baptist of Huber Heights, when we're church planting Gospel Heights up in Huber, he just said it was very ironic that, University Baptist had its founding and its original sponsorship from First Baptist of Huber back in the 60s. And here we are full circle now in 2025.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. Okay. So started it in a basement and then eventually acquired that building on Grange Hall Road. So University Baptist has only been in 2 locations.
As far as I know.
Okay.
I do read a little bit in the history about some trailer. I'm not sure where it was located, how they used it. But my recollection is in terms of a physical building, those are the 2 locations we've been at.
Fascinating. Okay. Do you know anything about the name University Baptist Church? Was that with its connection to Wright State? Was that just what was kind of the original vision behind that name?
So my understanding, at least I'm talking with Estel, was that was the vision that they had to be able to reach out to the students at Wright State. Much smaller campus in those years. Yeah. Don't get it's nothing like the campuses there today, but to reach out to them and to make them part of the ministry and mission of the University Baptist Church.
Praise the Lord. Well, that's really cool. Okay, so we've talked kind of about some of the foundations of UBC getting started, how all of that happened, where they came from. So original mission, right? Wanting to reach out to Wright State students and then kind of seeing it morph over the years in some different ways. So moving forward then to the early 90s, when you guys were a part of the move and around when the building swap happened, when did you move away then? So you were here for 5 years, you said?
Right.
Serving at Wright Pat. When did you move away and then come back? What did that look like?
So in 94, the Air Force decided that I needed a different job. And so they took me to a place called Rome, New York. Griffiths Air Force Base was in the process. At that time, there was a process going through by Congress called BRAC, the Base Realignment Commission. And so Griffiths was one of the places that was being shut down as an Air Force base. But the Air Force also had a research laboratory up there that they decided to continue in place. And so I went up as a part of the research laboratory to help set that up to make sure that we could continue to function in a way that we didn't have the support of an Air Force base right next to us and a part of us.
Got it. How long were you up at Rome?
So I was up there by assignment a little over about 3 years. The last 6 months of it, or 4 to 6 months of it, went to Hanscom Air Force Base in Boston, just outside of Boston. And I was a support group commander down there and taking care of work that they needed done there as well. So
got it. And then did you transfer back here? Did they send you elsewhere? What were some of your next?
So the reassignment was back to here, right out of both of those assignments in a sense. And so the last 3 years I spent here at Wright-Patterson.
Got it.
And we came back, and as soon as we got back, we came back to this church. So we were not interested in going shopping for churches. We knew where we were coming back to.
So you came back in, would that have been 97?
97, right.
And then you haven't moved since?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then this has been so fun for me. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to dive into a couple more questions. See you in a sec. We hope that you've been enjoying this particular episode about UBC history. If you want to learn more about our history and want to be able to read specific dates and things as you're piecing things together with this conversation that I'm having with Harry, you can go to www.ubcbeavercreek.com/ourhistory. And it is under the I'm New tab as well. If you just go to the homepage, and you can walk through all of these things and fill in the gaps as Harry and I have our conversation. Hope that you do that. And I hope that this has been beneficial for you as you recognize where we've come from. All right. Welcome back. Well, we have a lot of other things to talk about. And Harry, I think as we've talked about kind of your transition back to Dayton, and inserting yourself back into things going on with UBC. When you came back to this area and your family got reconnected with UBC, what were some of the things that you were seeing? Who was the pastor? What was the health of the church? Give us kind of from 1997 on. Let's talk about some of the things that happened.
Okay, so in that break while I was gone, we had already had already come to this location, and the only building that was standing basically was what today we would call a chapel.
Okay.
In that interim, they were growing and continuing to grow, and so when we came back, they were actively pursuing basically what we call today the MPR.
Got it.
Building that facility, bringing it on board as it connected to this one.
Now it was Pastor Hollinger who was the pastor when you left. Who was the pastor? Was he still here? Who was the pastor when you came back?
No. So in the interim, after we left, Pastor Hollinger also left, and he went to New York to a pastorate up there. And the pastor that replaced him was Jim Dickey. And Jim had been very successful with a church down in the Cincinnati area. I don't remember why specifically he felt like the Lord was calling him away from there. But he came up here. He had researched the church even before the church researched him, and felt that this is where he wanted to be. And the Lord brought him in here, and so they were growing.
Yeah, what was the size of the church when you came back approximately?
I would say maybe 60 to 80 people, maybe somewhere around there.
Okay.
Still many of the original ones. Estel Johnson was there. Ron and Bonnie Smith were there. They'd been there for a long time here, and there's others. And so, but the church was already starting to do something. They were involved in a building program with Buckeye Baptist Builders, which is a little bit like what Builders for Christ, where folks from around the state came in, helped raise the MPR gym, and so that was all active as we got back here at that point.
Yeah,
and it was fun. It was a great time. There was a great excitement that we began to learn how to use the new facility, all the land that's at this facility here. Yeah. So that was just a wonderful time. So at that point, then, like I said, Jim Dickey, Pastor Dickey, was the pastor that was here.
Okay. Got it. So Jim Dickey was leading the charge on the construction of the MPR. Mm-hmm. So when was the MPR constructed?
Okay, it would have been done about 97.
Okay,
or so. That's
so right around the time when you guys were coming back. That was wrapping up.
It took another several months to finish off the inside, get the wallboard up, get the electrics and stuff like that during that time.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, so with Jim Dickey, then how long did he serve as pastor? We've talked about some of the ups and downs, right? Mm-hmm. And with pastoral transitions, and let me roll this back. It's probably worth mentioning, right? We have a different polity and structure now of UBC versus what it used to be.
Correct.
So when I talk about like lead pastors, this would have just been like a senior pastor within like a deacon board and the congregation. Is that kind of how things were organized?
Yeah, it would have been a lead pastor with a body of deacons.
Okay.
And then was it staff? While Jim Dickey was here, not Andy. I don't know if we had a worship director on staff with him. I don't believe so. But by the time I got back, and shortly thereafter, we had several staff members. Typically, we had a secretary. We had a worship director. He eventually brought me on as a pastor of administration.
Okay.
And we had a children's director, part-time children's director.
Okay.
So that was kind of the staff that we had in the 97, 98, 99 in that time frame.
Got it. Okay. So fairly robust. With
growing.
Yep. Few staffers, deacon body.
Yep.
But it's always been congregational. So
congregational, that's correct.
Okay. So UBC's always been a congregational church. But then obviously under Jason's leadership in this last phase of UBC history, there's been a transition from the deacon body being like, how would you describe that with that transition with the deacon body and the elder body? No?
So even before then, I would say, and even under when we were under Pastor Dickey, it was very apparent to several of us on the body of deacons that there were a set of folks, in that in essence today we would have called elders, mm-hmm. And the others were men that served wonderfully and very effectively. All of them did the jobs of a deacon, but there were some who were more. The Lord was calling more towards leadership mm-hmm. Type things, although it was still a part of what we called a body of deacons.
Yeah, and there were some that were more pastoral in their care of members versus ones that were more acts of service, taking care of people kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Totally makes sense. And yeah, that's good.
And that was I will say that, for years, Southern Baptist Church has typically survived in that thing that mm-hmm. the elder was the pastor and the deacons were the others that served.
Yeah.
But even in all those, you knew that you had men on the body of deacons that were doing more than just serving.
Yeah, doing a lot of the eldering.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the pastoral care and other things. So.
That's interesting. Okay. So Harry, you've talked a lot about some of the spiritual warfare that University Baptist has encountered over the years. So talk to me a little bit about how you've seen that happen over the last, 35, 40 years, that you've been around. What are some of the ways that you've seen that happen?
Okay. So I think for context, you need to be clear here. When you look at Scripture, it's very clear that there's a spiritual aspect of what's going on as well as a physical aspect. Mm-hmm. And in that spiritual world, in that spiritual aspect, it's very clear that God is the creator, and that one of those created beings was one that was called Satan or Lucifer. There's a couple of different names. And that entity basically rebelled against God the Father. And there's been tension. The scriptures talk about this tension all along. So there's an underlying current that Satan will do what he can to disrupt the work of God as best he can, to make it as ineffective as he can. And so in this church, when we joined it under Pastor Hollinger, it was beginning to grow. It was, as I said, we were looking for new space to move to the next one. But in that process, there was some spiritual warfare taking place, and often targeted towards the primary leaders in the entity, which ultimately brought about some issues that whether anyway, it was disruptive, and it was taken care of a little bit in terms of his retiring or resigning, going to another facility. And in comes then Pastor Dickey. And Pastor Dickey was here, and again, growing. The Lord was just blessing us immensely. And the warfare that took place with him, Pastor Dickey was, let me just say it this way. As he was growing up, the state of Ohio had to delay giving him his optometry degree until he became old enough to be accepted.
Wow.
I mean, that's the mind that was in this, and the heart of this in Jim Dickey. He used that optometry then as a tool of missions, and would often go on mission trips, have eye clinics for the people he was going to.
Cool.
Use that to open up the opportunity then to share the gospel with them, and that was just kind of neat to help him do that, and excuse me. Towards the year end of 1999 or so, he had a mission trip that he took a couple from the church, a single person, as well as some others, and went over, I believe it was to Crimea. Had a very effective ministry. At that point, the Soviets were allowing some of the indigenous people to come back to their area. They would, in their community, they welcomed the gospel. They read the scriptures and the Koran at night publicly. I mean, they were a very open community, and so it was just very notable to see God use him in that way. 6 months later, he went back. This time with a much smaller group and not many, only one from here. And by then, Satan had brought in a very fundamentalist Muslims who were determined to keep him from being able to share the gospel with the people that were there. The people basically allowed him to set up his shop, and then they surrounded the building and kept the fundamentalists out while he was able to minister to them in terms of the eye clinic. But there was stories we get back that apparently there was at one point he was being chased through the town by some machete wielding people. And whatever that did to his heart, I don't know, except that I do know that when he came back, he was changed. And within a few months, we had a Easter service. He taught it with a pastor and a professor from Cedarville University called Jim Bjornstad. And they kind of split the service. And after the service was over, I don't remember the next time I ever saw Jim Dickey. He just walked out.
Wow.
That's how serious this issue of spiritual warfare is. Whether we just didn't cover him in prayer properly, we just weren't attentive to what was going on, it just tore us apart. Jim Bjornstad helped out in the transition. He was still a professor, so he did a lot of the preaching for us. But the point was that it just was devastating to us. It really hurt us as a congregation, and our numbers started to dwindle some, and quite a bit during that. About a year later, then we wound up chose another pastor. He was very good at preaching, but there was something missing. I'm not really quite sure. It just, every pastor has their own way they connect with people. I think he thought his was through preaching, but the heart of the people weren't connected to him, in my opinion. So that became tough.
So how long, what was his name?
So, I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay. How long was he pastoring?
So he was a pastor here for about three and a half years. Russell was his last name.
Russell.
And we again saw the congregation begin to decline significantly during that time.
Yeah, towards the end of his leadership time here, what was the size of the church?
So we were about maybe 60 people, 50 people. We were older generation. We knew that. We didn't have much of a younger generation. We tried. We had things like Vacation Bible School. We had Upward Basketball, but it just wasn't growing anymore. And
the staff, was there really no other staff besides him at that point?
That's probably true.
Yeah. So you had rolled off everyone else. You were still probably serving, but maybe not receiving a salary anymore.
Let me go back and think. So I had come on, I think I was still on from Jim Dickey. But at any rate, no, he brought me on just about 3 months after I retired from the Air Force.
Okay.
And that was between his 2 mission trips. So I was kind of staff at that point. And we had a leadership team from the folks that were leading the various ministries, and worked that through until we actually called then, turns out to be Casey Cockerham.
Yep.
To come in and basically then fill in at that point, take over as our pastor at that point.
So when did Casey become the pastor here?
I don't remember the date. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Approximate?
Let's see. 2000.
It's been like 2005.
Maybe 2004 or 5, somewhere in that time frame.
Got it. Okay. So
probably 5. Yeah.
Okay. So we had, Jim Dickey was here until around 2000. Transition. Then you had Pastor Russell here for at least 3.
Right.
But then there was a longer transition from Russell into Casey.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So Casey came 2008, 2009, something like that?
Yes.
Okay. And then he was here until then there was a decent transition between Pastor Casey and Pastor Jason. So that would have been like 2015, 2016, probably.
Yeah.
When Casey was no longer the pastor. And then there was a transition there as well.
Right.
With Jason then coming in 2018.
Yeah.
So talk to me as we're continuing to kind of follow the theme of the spiritual warfare over the course of some changing of leadership here over the last 25 years. Obviously that situation with Jim Dickey, that sounds crazy. And probably was a real shock to people.
And it was.
So talk to me about, Pastor Russell, maybe not quite as in touch as the church would have liked. So did he resign? Did the church vote him out? Like, how did that happen?
So I'd already mentioned that, one of the things that happens, in spiritual warfare, from my perspective, is that Satan wants to disrupt and destroy. And part of that disruption and destroying were that people then left. When people leave, their gifts leave, the size leaves.
Yeah, it's hard.
And so we drew down to a small group with a much smaller budget. And we had on staff a sufficiently large group at one point that we just didn't have the funds any longer to support what was left.
Yeah.
And so it got to a point where the finance committee in a meeting, a church meeting, basically told the staff, including the lead pastor, that they were going to have to cut all the salaries by about a third or more, because they didn't have any money. And whereas the pastor objected, it wasn't an issue of anything other than we didn't have the funds to pay him. And he had to make a choice. And he chose, if we couldn't pay him, he chose to retire or go to another place if he could find it in order to be able to make it to retirement.
Got it.
And so in the process then, he also left. And now we're in a time frame that things are very difficult for us. We chose a pulpit search committee, and they took on the approach from a much more disciplined process, I think, in a way. But it took them 2 years until we actually got to a place where we were going to ask somebody to come and join us.
So at UBC's lowest point there, in that transition point, how many people would attend here on a Sunday morning approximately?
I'd say maybe between 40 and 60 people at the very most.
Wow.
Maybe been smaller than that. We had enough funds to pay the facilities and pay off the debt, what we had left. That was not the issue. It was the issue We didn't have enough to keep the staff and also have a full-time pastor at that point.
Wow. I mean, it's crazy because it's like, you think about that not even less than 20 years ago, and you think about what UBC is now, and it's just like, wow, Lord, thank you that you are a God who provides and brings through. And like, man, just thinking about God's faithfulness and his care and his provision for this church over that time span, that is miraculous. Mm-hmm. And, I think everybody always talks about how at every members meeting you get up and say like, God is taking such good care of us. But man, it makes me realize why you have that perspective where you would regularly come up and just say, the Lord has taken care of us. He has so richly blessed us. Because you would have been here when the budget was like less than 200,000. Whereas, now we're looking at a regular budget for our church of, a couple million. It's like, those are very different church bodies, very different entities, and just like, wow, Lord, thank you for the way that you brought through.
So let me bridge off that and go back to where we were in the sense that, so Pastor Russell leaves. We constituted a pastor search committee, and the folks on that committee, I don't remember all of their names, took a much different approach than the previous one did.
Okay.
And in fact, that approach took almost 2 years. During that time, Jim Bjornstad came back and helped us some during that. But it was a very long, methodical, deep in prayer time frame. I remember Don McMurray, I believe, advised during that point to the committee, I was not on the committee, that they should look for, because of the size of where we had been and where we might go to look for someone who had been serving effectively as a member of a church staff that was functioning very well. And so when they looked at the resumes and they talked to folks, they're kind of narrowing the search. And one of the people, they had seen the resume, but somebody had advised them, you need to go back and talk specifically to him. And when they did, it was kind of like the resume was more generic at that time, but the one he resubmitted after that, and this is Casey Cochran, was much more targeted. And the committee felt very convinced that he was the right person. They did a couple things differently this time, which I think were wonderful. Previously, typically, you would if you're going to bring in a pastor, you'd bring him in for a Sunday morning. He might preach in what they call in lieu of a call, in view of a call. You might meet with him for a couple hours on Sunday afternoon, and then Sunday evening you would vote on him. That didn't go well the last time we did it. So this time they brought in Casey and his family a day early and just had a fellowship hour for a couple hours. By the time we brought it to a vote to the church, they were already calling him as our pastor. I mean, that's how much love there had been there for him just in getting to know him. Much, much different approach.
Yeah.
2 years worth of lots of prayer and counseling. And so we brought Casey on at that point.
Okay. So we had Pastor Casey here for 7-8 years, something like that.
I think so.
Okay. So the church rebounded under his leadership.
Absolutely.
So started to grow, started to see new families, people coming in. So what happened to Pastor Casey?
The church was growing. We had new staff. By then, we had brought on a full-time youth director. We had a worship director. I don't think we'd gotten to students yet, student ministry, but we were growing. We were a strong staff that was growing at that point.
Caleb O'Neill would have been here. Bobby Shell.
And Shane had joined us. And so we had a very strong staff going on as Casey came in with us. And things were growing. And we were changing program status from upward basketball and vacation Bible school to camps and some other things, and very significant changes. And God was blessing us immensely. But remember, I talked about earlier about this issue of spiritual warfare.
Yep.
And when things begin to grow and things to begin to take effect, Satan begins to get his claws into stuff. And he did with Casey, unfortunately. And Casey, to his credit, was mature enough to realize at one point that what had happened he needed to basically resign. And on his own, he then began notifying people and stuff. And so I from a spiritual perspective, he still had great spiritual depth to him.
He had wisdom.
And he was willing to, to step up to that. And God, I think, blessed that in the long term. It's painful for the first couple of years when that transition takes place for anybody, any family. What we did differently this time is that we also brought in, after Casey resigned, a man who had been trained specifically to be an interim pastor. And that was James Drysball. And he then helped guide the church through the process of addressing some of the issues that needed to be addressed, and as well as putting together the ability to go search for a new pastor.
Yeah.
He did that in a very effective way. By contract with him, he was not allowed to be a potential candidate to be a pastor for us here. So that meant that he could say things freely and effectively, not wondering whether or not that was going to terminate whether or not he could be a person.
And so
a subject and a candidate.
Yeah. So we still had a staff, right? So Bobby Shell would have been here, Caleb O'Neill.
And Shane was still here.
Shane was here. And a lot of people as well that are still serving in key areas in our church would have been here. Like
absolutely.
Van Scoys would have been here. So Jeff and Paula, people like Rich and Leslie Porter would have been here. Right. Some different ones who are helping to lead in a lot of different capacities, either eldering or team leaders would have been here already at that time. So right. The church was still stable in a lot of regards, but reeling, right? Yes. Really struggling from.
Probably put well. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. And then 2018, right? Jason, came and got connected with the church through a lot of different things that I'm sure could be said there, but want to, wrap us up here with time. But then go ahead.
But let me connect on that because there was something that was very interesting to us. And I was in finance. I was the treasurer, I think, at that point, or the finance director.
Okay.
One of the things that became very clear was that Jason was the one that we wanted here. We called him, and he told us, well, I can't come now in February. I've got to finish schooling here, so it'll be like June or so. And we talked about this, and we went back and asked him and said, Jason, look, we want to bring you on as a pastor right now. No duties, no requirements of or anything here other than to be a part of us. Get your schooling done. When that happens, when you're done with that, fine, then you can start your preaching and stuff. But we want you on staff right now. And so he accepted that. And what that did gave him an opportunity to wander around into every aspect and every part of the ministry that was here. Not because during preaching, during services, and he didn't have any of that responsibility. But in my mind, it allowed him to get to know us in a way that when he did start preaching, he knew us. It wasn't like there was a brand new guy on the block who was trying to guess what he was in. Yeah. He was well familiar with the congregation at that point, and it worked out wonderfully. God used that blessing.
So Drysball preached.
Drysball did a number of the preaching and some other folks, but yes.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And so it worked out very well for us, as it turns out.
Okay. Last question that I did want to ask. UBC East.
Yes. Okay.
When did we buy that building? When did that happen? Who was the pastor at that time?
That's a good question. I don't remember specifically when we bought it. I do know that we were growing again and we're trying to figure out how to build.
Okay.
And I think that was under Jason.
Or was it under Casey?
In that time frame.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I won't be.
No, that's fine.
Because I do remember that we didn't realize that the church that was over there was also looking to sell their building.
Yeah.
Because they were growing and going somewhere else also.
Got it.
And that's a good point. So we wound up approaching them over there, chose to buy that building because of its location as opposed to find another place somewhere here in Beavercreek to have a satellite campus or something. And so it just turned out to be good that it was all right here together.
Yeah.
And right next to each other.
And then we used that like as a youth building for a long time.
Youth building and for other activities, right, until it became clear that we could use it the way we did over the times when Jason's been here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and so since Jason came in 2018, obviously there's been a lot of things, a lot of staff transitions. We talked a little bit about the elder and deacon
Right.
You know, the polity organization thing.
Redid the bylaws.
Yep. The building program,
Yep.
With Builders for Christ, and getting into the new building in 2023. You know, so there's been,
It has been that long.
yeah, there's been quite a bit. And just the faithfulness of the Lord, you know, over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man, it's cool. Just looking back now and, you know, thinking through all of those things, God has been so faithful.
Yeah. And let me just, for those who've been paying attention or trying to write down and say how these things work.
Yeah.
A wonderful example of, if you're standing on the plains in Colorado and you're looking west towards the Rocky Mountains, and you see mountain range after mountain range after mountain range after mountain range, and quite frankly, they look like they're all right on top of each other, but there are big gaps between them. So in this discussion we've had, we've tried to go back and look at some of those gaps, but the gaps have not always been placed quite accurately in terms of the timing on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The sequence, I think, has been very good, and I appreciate Bryson keeping that in line. Because for me, I look back through that whole thing, and I just see a history, not necessarily tied to a calendar, but the things that God did during that time frame, the spiritual warfare battles that we fought, and basically the ones that God, you know, has brought us through and is graciously allowing us to grow now and be effective in the community that we're at.
And I think it's important because, you know, I'm one of many new kids on the block, so to speak, you know, over the last few years that love this church, you know, and love what the Lord has done here. But it's important for us to recognize what God has done to bring it to this place. And the history that we're building now, we're building off of the faithfulness of faithful saints, you know, who have served and fought these spiritual battles over the years. It's really remarkable to think about, and it's important for us to remember where we've come from.
And along those lines, if you want something consistently to pray about, pray for the leadership that's in the church, and that Satan would not be able to get it, to distract them or to get them off track. And so as strong as we're growing now, that doesn't mean Satan won't be back. Don't know where the attack will come from, don't know how it'll happen, but I'm pretty much, I can guarantee, having looked back and have talked about through this this discussion, that he's attacked time and again, a little bit different each time, but it has been effective. And I think at those times we just weren't praying deep enough and hard enough to identify it and then to basically deal with it as he did.
Yeah, amen. Well, good reminder. And Harry, thank you so much. This is this is so fun, and genuinely, this was a joy to sit down and talk to you about these things. So we'll wrap it up here. But thanks for coming on, and thankful for the opportunity to chat just about UBC history. And I hope that this has been helpful for you, our listeners, and that you consider how the Lord might use you to make him known in your home, your community, and the world. We'll see you next time on another episode of Talking Points.